Hey, good morning. Dr. R. Michael Fisher here. Well, I may look like I just got out of bed, but sort of true I did. It's about 4:30 in the morning. Now it's 5. I'm laying there thinking in the dark before the birds start singing. Whoa, this hate thing is really taking off. What? Blowing in the wind. Yeah, you get it. Blowing in the wind. The seductions of hate. Seductions of following your course, that which is going to liberate you, you follow it, you track it. As I did back in 1989, said we need to track this notion of fear to find out what this path of fearlessness is all about. Path of fearlessness will be our guide to our liberation. That was kind of the simple, almost naive at some sense, but I think still very wise idea that blew my mind open in my life in '89. So I've been doing all these videos in the last 5 years, and I've never done one on hate. I've written hundreds of articles and never done one on hate. And there's a reason. So that's what this talk is about this morning is the winds are blowing. The new word seems to be hate. And then the cure, of course, is love. Um, and hearing that in politics, I'm hearing it in the presidential, work of Marianne Williamson as she's trying to be leader of this country. It's going to come out in others. Arnold Schwarzenegger lately has started a whole institute and project on he's going to eliminate, hate and so on with his approach. Yeah. So it starts with a story. Back in about 1990, 91, after I had started the In Search of Fearlessness Community and Research Institute, there were several people, 20, 30 people involved, attracted to think around and the idea of fearlessness and how it would be provide a new paradigm, a fearlessness paradigm, as I was argued, that would start us to get out of this fear matrix trap. Done lots of videos writing about that. Well, I had a very powerful experience around this notion of hate and why I sniffed out something that just wasn't right about the whole thing. Okay, let me get to that. What do you mean? Somebody invited, so again, I'm teaching courses on how to heal, how to transform. Peer counseling included spontaneous art creation making, or included um, hero journeys in the wilderness, all kinds of practices that were to be helpful to the learning. And then there was this whole information on fear and fearlessness I said was core. We need to learn this stuff anew. We haven't been taught properly by the society and so on. So it was this great vision, right? And this was part of my leadership at that time. And I look back on it, you know, 34 years later and think, okay, what did I learn? So one of the key things I learned about hate in that time, because I was already thinking in this fearlessness paradigm, I think I had a good grip on it, whatever that means, and that's hard to put into words. But it's like a new lens got popped into me, and that's great. A spiritual awakening, call it whatever you want. The folks invited in that community said, Michael, you should come and watch this series that's, well, it's kind of a series or it was a set of documentaries on CBC radio, TV, sorry, which was, our major channel here in Canada, supposedly the public broadcasting system. It usually has very good programming, but it's deteriorated over the years. And they invited me to this, watching of a series that was done on neo-Nazism and its rise in Canada. Well, this is really relevant to the topic of hate, as you know, because this is what people often talk about: polarization nowadays. They're talking about neo-fascism, at least people in certain circles, and making a really huge deal about it. And it is a huge deal, where we're going to go and how we're going to handle that as societies today, cultures, politics, and just generally a philosophy of life, and how do we live with people with these kinds of differences, and will we become the next fascists, the neo fascists, the ones that are harder to recognize. Okay, got invited to this watching party. um, I think there was nice iced tea, and it was a hot summer day. We went down into her basement, the woman who really wanted to show me this. um, and we watched the movie documentary. It's a half hour, and it was really powerful, and it was really scary in that sense. It was all about how neo-Nazism was growing in Canada, and some very uh, provocative activist movements, actions that they took at the time. So this would have been around the late 80s, early 90s, yeah. And and they made this big thing: there's this new movement arising, and it's going to take over in Canada. And of course, it scares the hell out of people, because they think of the Holocaust and what the Nazis did there, in Europe. And okay, no doubt these people are calling themselves neo-Nazis, and there's cameras within some of their meetings that had been snuck in, and we got to see how they talk, how they think, how they act. They're very charismatic types, who lead these as well, right? So lots of violence, overt, and that was filmed on camera. Journalists were attacked, and left-wing, so-called progressive liberal type people that were protesting against them got attacked and hurt and threatened. And so you ended 40 minutes of this documentary, and everybody's in the room. There's 5 or 6 people, and these are, again, part of my community. Not say my community, it's the community that myself and Barbara Bickle, and before that another person, that we just had coalesced to, some kind of spiritual community that really was attempting to not live in the world of fear based reality. But this hate was on, and the announcers in the documentary talked about hate, and same with the people in the community that I was with. And I'm saying, whoa, 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 I need to speak here. Um this film is a film about fear. Why are we not talking about that? That's what you're experiencing, right? Yeah, yeah. They agreed, looked at me, and, well, okay, if that's what you're experiencing, why don't we talk about what we're experiencing? Well, yeah, okay. So we sort of did that a little bit, but I could see I really never got very far in my trying to convince them of another direction. They were really convinced this was about hate. And I can't remember, that's a long time ago, as I say, over 30 years ago, but I remembered that I had known a kind of interior commitment and truth about the unusefulness. And this is what I kind of lectured to them in the moment. Um, the unusefulness of using the concept of hate and the word hate. And I'm not going to become a word police here. Don't use the word hate. I don't think that's useful either. What I'm interested in is to dig underneath. So that was my first experience of watching. I call it the hate seduction. It has this very attractive pull. It's kind of like using the word anti-abortion, in certain circles. It has the attraction of using anti-Semitism. It has the attraction of just this really dramatic hate, and somehow an American culture, I think, has particularly got a seductive vulnerability to using this term. Maybe Europe does too. I haven't lived in Europe, to know but I certainly come from a strong European background. My mom was really, an immigrant, and I'm first born as an immigrant child in Canada here in the 50s. So I know my mother's quote, and she would have that word, and she would have that disgust for Germans, for example. I'm just a little kid, and I'm picking this up like left, right, and center right from day one, more or less. And I never got into using that word, and it never was a word that attracted me. But I do see how powerful it was for my mom to say how much she was disgusted by this other group. Let's call them X group. And she hated them. So when she would see a German, hear the accent, I would watch her reaction. Post-traumatic, of course. So there's one little cue. When is the hate phenomenon part of a post-traumatic reaction? I'm not going to theorize deeply about that, but that's just coming to me in the moment as a connection, especially going back to my mother and that story. But that's not the focus of the video. I want to move now to contemporary times. So I used the word disgust because there's a lot of new research going on emotions right now and affect. Tons of new, last 30 years, but particularly in the last decade. And again, someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger coming out of California, was a politician there successfully for years. He's a Republican, well known. And I saw in the interview just last night, I think it was Fox News, and they're all excited and supportive of his new movement he's going to bring to end hate, in America and the world. He's very interested in the world. So he's got this grand humanistic mission, right? And then he talks about his background growing up in Austria, and his father, as he tells the story, was a Nazi officer. And okay, great cause, Arnold Schwarzenegger and all his followers, which he has many. He's putting out videos and apparently billions of viewers or hits. Okay, well, whatever. It's a wave. I recently was doing a critique of the Course in Miracles, this great so-called esoteric teaching. Not that I poo-poo it, but I also have my reservations about those who use that text. That's another story, but you can look it up, Course in Miracles. And the very, very competent two people, Emily and Robert, who run this organization, Circle of Atonement, I believe it's called, and they are, advanced students, like seriously advanced students of the Course in this new spiritual teaching. And some people call it the New Age type of teaching, of a revision of Jesus Christ's teachings and some Eastern mysticism, etc. And I think that's all pretty accurate. I can't prove this is the words of Jesus Christ, but maybe it is. And good psychology, good stuff about healing and transformation, forgiveness and love. It sets up fear versus love. And that's the major part of the teaching from Marianne Williamson in my study of her. And it was what she brought to her candidacy as a politics of love rather than a politics of fear in 2020. And then now in 2024, I've been talking about how she's been dropping the word fear. She's not using it hardly at all. In fact, a recent interview I watched her, she's not even hardly using love. I can't even hear that. She's churning into a different kind of person in the phenomenon of this political power grabbing and anger and the hate of different parties and what she's experienced as hate. And I'm starting to see slippage, what not just in her, but in this Course in Miracles group, Circle of Atonement people. And I challenged them on email at one point, and I said, Emily and Robert, like, why are you spending so much time talking about hate? Course in Miracles, as I understand it, has a metaphysics of you either are coming from a love or you're coming from fear. Well, that I haven't studied the Course in Miracles well, so I can only take bits of what I've taken. I've bits from what I've read of Marianne Williamson, and before her, Gerald Jampolsky. I've been on this for 30 years, studying and reading all kinds of works, right? This is just, they're just part of it. I study everything I can hear about how people frame fear related to love, especially, and hate. And they said back in an email, very nice, they said, well, don't blame us. In a way, they said, the Course in Miracles has lots on hate. Oh, okay, I haven't seen that, but maybe it is. Maybe I'll look it up and study it. Maybe I won't. Um, and they were justifying themselves, basically. Okay, so here's some major spiritual teachers of liberation path, and they're onto the hate thing too. And it's like, wow, 2024 coming up, 2023 we're in now, and I'm going, yeah, this seems to be people want to use the word hate and not fear. Like they didn't even use fear the whole time they were talking about Marianne Williamson and her politics bid, which they were highly supporting, understandable. Marianne Williamson is a famous teacher of the Course in Miracles. So that was another experience of bringing up the hate thing. And um, I'm starting to go, okay, there's like a meme going around uh, to bring up that word, the H word, and spread it instead of talking about fear. See my point? That's the fearlessness paradigm critique, is that there will be many things that will distract us and guide us to chase other rabbits than the fear rabbit, which I've always argued is the most important. Now, you don't have to buy that, and you don't have to see it that that's my religion or my ideology. But if you just listen to the news, watch press, yeah, they're getting a lot of energy and a lot of seduction, attraction, which is that they want. And the January 6th insurrection in the United States with that right wing movement and the following of the Donald Trump encouragement, to challenge the 2020 election results, plus many other things as part of that movement. Yeah, so there's huge feelings in the terror and the fear-based reality we're living, where polarization, hate are going to be the seductions and the talk words, the talking point words. And I'm just doing this video, and I'm really, there's no use beating around and making this topic boring. Just the last thing I want to do. I just want to put it out this morning. I can't sleep because I'm so disturbed by the seduction again as it rises. And that's okay. Okay, so it's arising. I'm not, oh, that's so horrible. No, it's not so horrible. Yes, it is horrible, but it's not. What is more interesting is what do we do with it? And how can the fearlessness path paradigm that I'm teaching and many others are teaching, if you follow my work, that's one of the things I do is I synthesize all the others so that we have some good stuff going on. We collect stuff from different places and not just come out with our big strong personal opinions or just one source of what we're going to understand about the path of liberation. But let's go back to discuss for a moment as I end the video. Disgust is this deep feeling, which I don't doubt exists as a feeling. One might call it emotion. I prefer just to say it's a feeling of disgust, is deep. And it's not just about humans. That is in all organisms a kind of repelling away from things that are toxic. And I'll leave it at that without, again, a lot of theorizing. And that also may be projected as a disgust onto things that are not toxic, but are stereotyped as being the toxic, the enemy, the poison, right? The vermin. And you can hear that in the Nazi language and many other ideologies. They are the vermin. They are the problem. They will pollute us. with disgust is always a tipping point on the other side, which is the pursuit of purity. Those are deep factors. So don't get me wrong at the end of this talk that I'm poo pooing all the discussion on hate and disgust and neo-Nazism, fascism, totalitarianism, and so on. Definitely deep threats to the human condition and life on this planet, but they're not the only way to understand. And I don't think those terms are actually the best way and most useful to transforming the problem. And what is the problem, Dr. Fisher? It is the fear problem. So let's stick with that. And we can talk about the hundreds of fear words that are like or referring to the fear patterning, this deep fear problematique that humanity has to deal with in a unique way like no other species has had to do. And perhaps our times today, in this year, this millennium, this coming of age of our species, whether we make it or not on this planet, now is the time to look at the fear problem, not be distracted by the hundreds of words and other ideas and concepts that will seduce us because they get a lot of hits, because they excite us to a point of shock and awe, and then we get a little bit stupid in our shock and awe. We're not stupid, and we don't have to be operating in shock learning. Key part to all of this. And as an educator, I care a lot about. All right, so that's it for this morning. You can see I'm moving, so I'm just filling in a little bit of my news. Barbara and I are moving to another place just on the other side of the city of Nanaimo. We'll be opening up there our new place, and hopefully that'll be a place that we can live there for some years, an apartment. And no, we're not buying it. We don't have that kind of money. We're not in that caliber of class. We're very much bohemian artists types and thinkers, and I'm a philosopher, artist, educator, tuning out this morning to say, let's think well, especially in this time, and let's stay after the rabbit that really counts for the answers to our problems.